Released in 1989 and starring Patrick Swayze as a cooler at a newly refurbished roadside bar who protects a small town in Missouri from a corrupt businessman. I was raised on R-rated action movies, so movies like this will always have a place in my library. Hopefully by the end of this, you'll be convinced it should be in yours too. Here are 10 reasons Roadhouse is a goddamn classic. Music has always been a powerful tool in a filmmaker's arsenal, and popular music was a huge part of movies in the 80s and 90s. The movie opens with a song by a musician from another famous bar from movies. See this guy right there? He's also in the band in From Dusk Till Dawn. Now I could write a bunch of fluff about techno cranes and dolly tracks, but the scene speaks for itself, and it's the music doing all the talking. Why do you think James Gunn opened Guardians of the Galaxy with Redbone, or Quentin Tarantino does a needle drop every 10 minutes? The nerdy answer is, it sets a tone really easily, and it brings the audience into the world they created. But the real answer is because it's cool as fuck. 20 seconds into the movie and you want to Spartan kick someone in the chest. But as soon as you see inside the bar, it's the exact opposite vibe, and that shows us how effective Dalton is as a cooler. Joel Silver is a bad motherfucker. He's been in the game since 1979, and he's produced a string of classic action movies. 48 Hours, Commando, the Lethal Weapon series, Predator, Die Hard, The Last Boy Scout, Demolition Man, the Matrix series, and the Robert Downey Jr.-led Sherlock Holmes movies. He's got the greatest run I've ever seen. With 125 credits in his filmography, he's one of the most prolific producers working today. He's been dominating the box office for decades, and he almost single-handedly defined the action genre for the 80s and 90s. Joel Silver is the godfather of the modern action movie. With a production budget of $15 million and a box office gross of $30 million, Roadhouse was a flop, especially when you compare it to some of Joel Silver's other productions with similar budgets, like Predator's $98 million or Lethal Weapon with $120 million box office returns. So it didn't do well in theaters, but with home video and premium cable channels like HBO, Roadhouse gained a massive cult following, and it's the definition of a late hit.
All you have to do is follow 3 simple rules. 1, never underestimate your opponent. Expect the unexpected. 2, take it outside. Never start anything inside the bar unless it's absolutely necessary. And 3, be nice.
Roadhouse and its protagonist are full of contradictions in the best ways. It's both the most macho movie to ever come out of the 80s, while also being the gayest. Look, I obviously have a ton of reverence for this movie, but a lot of this can't be ignored. This is probably the most famous scene in the movie, like the opening scene. They're the best examples of the type of dude Dalton is. He's the best because he doesn't feel the need to prove it. He's a guy who doesn't fight because he knows he can kill you. A stoic brawler with a philosophy degree. There's something for everyone in Roadhouse, but for young men especially, Roadhouse should be required viewing. Roadhouse is full of nuggets of wisdom about bullies, masculinity, and the law of the jungle. The villain of the movie, Brad Wesley, is the type of dude that thinks he's hot shit because he's got money, like a high school senior with a legion of freshman friends who only tolerate him so that they can go to parties at his rich daddy's house. Brad Wesley is a perfect example of the type of man you don't want to be.
Never been put down?
No. Not really.
How do you explain that?
The ones who go looking for trouble are not much of a problem to someone who's ready for them.
This is one of the most slept-on scenes in the movie. Between this and Dalton's 3 rules, it's the best advice about conflict resolution. Fair fights are unicorns, so it's important to be prepared. You can't just rush in or act without a sense of situational awareness. From my experience, the loudest mouth usually doesn't want it. But on the other hand, some people are nuts, so choose your battles wisely. Because if you pick a fight you can't win, it might cost you more than you're willing to lose. Going back and watching Roadhouse after all these years, I noticed an unexpected ripple of Roadhouse's influence. Video games. Look at Jerry curled Randy Savage and his boys. These dudes are in every side-scrolling beat-em-up of the 90s. Especially this motherfucker right here. Roadhouse is endearingly cheesy. The scene where Dalton is doing Tai Chi by the lake is probably the top cheese moment of the movie. And it's shot like Tai Chi is the coolest thing since sliced cheese. Like that scene in Karate Kid where Daniel practices the crane kick. Then we see Brad Wesley across the lake watching him, and you know he's thinking the same thing we are. Look at this fucking nerd. But this nerd can kick your ass. They spent 5 days of production shooting this fight. Swayze and Marshall Teague did so many takes that they went from not getting along to broing out and wanting the fight to be as real as possible. So they beat the shit out of each other for 5 days. Every time you see a hit during this fight that looks like it might have made contact, it's because it did. A lot of these hits were real. Marshall Teague thought that log was fake. It wasn't. By the end of production on Roadhouse, Swayze was so jacked up he had 2 broken ribs and a busted knee. He turned down leading roles in Predator 2 and Tango and Cash for the movie Ghost because it was less physically demanding. The Golden Raspberry Awards is a parody award show honoring the worst of cinematic underachievements. So it's basically the reverse Oscars. It's a real-life player-haters ball. Roadhouse was nominated for 5 Razzie Awards. Worst Picture, Worst Director, Worst Screenplay, Worst Actor, and Worst Supporting Actor. It didn't win any. Star Trek V was the biggest loser that year. Roadhouse is some good-ass cheese.
I used to fuck guys like you in prison.